Well, so the other monster in the room under the bed is Google. I mean, Google. I think Google wins the whole thing. I don't see. It's almost like when Microsoft, again, go back to the early days, right? Microsoft was threatened by Netscape. So what did it do? It embedded an internet browser right into the software of Windows, and that was the end of Netscape. Netscape literally was one of the largest new tech companies on the planet. And the minute Microsoft saw that as a threat, they embedded a web browser, and Netscape was gone. I would argue within 2 years or 3 years, they were effectively gone from the conversation of technology instantaneously. I've never seen anything like it. It was one, and I think Microsoft got sued pretty hard for that. But that's Google's advantage right now, is they're embedded in search. And so all the searches now, at least the searches I see, are generating an artificial intelligent result and a tab. They're literally going to cannibalize the cash cow that made them one of the most valuable technology companies on the planet in order to win this race.
So it's a fascinating time. I get excited or passionate about the numbers. So if you look at the big four members of the arms race for training super smart AI models, there's Meta, Google, AWS, Microsoft, and then of course there's OpenAI. So let's say five. The amount of money they spent on data centers, much or even most of which was to train new models as opposed to servicing existing models, comprised about a third of all economic growth in the United States last year. So that's how we dodged the tariff bullet. They built a lot of data centers. It's good for the economy. But so OpenAI is kind of triggered an arms race it can't afford now. They've signed letters of intent for $1.3 or maybe $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years of data center spending. But at last check, I said I think they were losing $10 billion per quarter. And there are some estimates that over the first 9 months of the year in 2025, they might have even been losing money on inference because it was so expensive to service a given user query. Now that's a little speculative, but their path to profits is really tough, and they're competing with Google. Full disclosure, Google's a client of ours, but they're competing with Google, and Google doesn't need to go raise more money in order to pay existing commitments. They're paying for it with their own cash and their own balance sheet. So they're doing quite well. And I think that arguably they've kind of closed the gap with ChatGPT with their latest Gemini models. And to your point, they can build it into so much of what they already have, which helps organizations deploy workflows that are integrated and simpler to put to use.
Well, so two things. This is one of the one of the challenges with the layman, and one of the reasons why the early kind of buzz around AI is, well, it doesn't really get it right very often, because I don't think people appreciate they're using it like Google. They expect it to know what just happened. And a large language model doesn't work that way. A large language model trains on a finite amount of data. That'll change, obviously. And Google is starting to figure out how to weave the two together, which, again, is a massive advantage, right? So OpenAI trains, and Claude trains on a finite amount of data. You can ask it, what's the last thing you ingested? And it'll tell you. And it needs a new model in order to have access to all the new information that's happening. It doesn't know what just happened. Whereas Google, I think, is going to be able to, they have to, because people are trained to Google. Give me the news, give me the information, give me what just happened, give me perspective. What do you think about this or that? And so it's going to have to thread that needle of balancing what's happening right now with this deep, ingested, learned model of information, and bring the two together, which again is the promise of the whole thing. But secondarily, the idea that OpenAI is just burning money and doesn't have the massive stockpiles of cash that Google has acquired over the last 2 decades, is a problem for them that they have to solve immediately. And I believe the way that they are going to have to solve it, this is my supposition, is they have to go take economic resources away from existing industries. And I think they're going to start with the consulting industry. I think their game is to disrupt the massive consulting companies with API, with very proprietary API implementations for millions of dollars that basically replaces your need for paid hours of consulting time.
It could be. It is interesting, though. I think it's fascinating to look at the consulting model because you've got these supposedly super smart assistants that with near zero marginal cost can give you great analysis and so forth. But for the near term, there's still a need to figure out how to build this into your business processes. And if you can hire a McKinsey or a Bain to help you build it, and they're adjusting their business models so that you pay them based on the implementation success. So they're in it for a commission about the results, and you're not hiring them as much for the research and the fancy slides, because those are the kind of things the models can put out. But actually, the hard-nosed implementation knowledge based on what other Fortune 100 companies are doing and so forth. And so that's where I think that, and I haven't followed Accenture and McKinsey and their earnings, but it does appear to me that this is a big opportunity for them. I'm definitely not an AI doomer. I think that job-wise, there's actually an incredible opportunity for knowledge workers. There will be changes and disruptions, but I think that ultimately it's going to create a lot of opportunity for us. And consulting is probably one of those winners.
Well, I think it is a winner in the short term, and I couldn't agree with you more. That I think that most companies will turn to their consulting companies, their large consulting partners, and most large consulting companies will be in their face saying, "Let us do this for you." But this is always the game in business, right? You have a massive entity, OpenAI and Claude, I would argue, who can't. They're running out of oxygen. They won't be able to breathe. They have to take somebody's lunch money, and they're going to go after consulting's the easiest thing for them to get because in the end they are information workers. I mean, and you can buy a service layer pretty easily, I would argue. They might even end up buying. I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see OpenAI just consume some large service company and become effectively an implementer of their own model.
That's very interesting. That could be. Yeah, I think this is going to be a really interesting transformative year for Anthropic and OpenAI because they both are to varying degrees competing with Google. So they both have the profit problem. Anthropic, I think, reasonably expects to get to profit sooner, much sooner than OpenAI. They've been much more focused strategically. They're killing it with the developer use case. OpenAI has been kind of all over the place, in my view, a lot of strategic indirection. Sam Altman wants to design and build chips with Broadcom. They're getting into the ads business. They're doing all kinds of things, and they're spending all kinds of money. It was interesting to see indications this week that NVIDIA, the Wall Street Journal indicates that their $100 billion deal with OpenAI is on ice. They still want to participate in the IPO, but it does look like there are some folks stepping back a little bit on OpenAI because they're worried about how the numbers are gonna bear out. And the other interesting difference between OpenAI and Anthropic is that OpenAI, I think, has been a little more loose, cavalier perhaps with safety. Anthropic has been, they're very focused on doing AI right, and they're very focused on AI safety. Maybe a little bit more conservative in terms of what they put out. They're also more focused on corporations than OpenAI, which has a strong consumer base. So the net effect is that they'll probably start to diverge a little bit, both in terms of focus and in terms of success. I personally think Anthropic is going to pull ahead on the corporate front, in particular with OpenAI. this year.
I think what Anthropic has done with Claude Code is the canary in the coal mine. That is the doom scenario. What it's doing there, it's destroying the need for human programmers. I mean, there's no question about it. There will be no bottom rungs on the data architect, developer architect ladder. I would argue there aren't any bottom rungs on that ladder. That now you have to come out of school being an architect. You're not going to get hired as a junior coder and work your way up some sort of, whatever hierarchical structure to that role. And how do you get that experience? It's the worst case scenario. Honestly, when you take away the bottom rungs of a ladder for advancement for humans. And I would suggest that that's the beginning of the doom scenario, that what is going to happen to coding was inevitable. It was always a mathematical problem or just a binary problem to solve, which is easy in the end for technology. So that one is the first mover, because that was probably, even though it seems complicated to us, to me, it's not that complicated. It's actually just binary, ones and zeros, and away you go. And then, with all, it's going to destroy all kinds of things doing that. But again, the reason why, to your point, the reason why they will then succeed is because they have completely disrupted an industry and taken all the revenue and upside that the humans would have had. And that is, in my mind, what OpenAI has got to solve. They have got to do the same thing. And I think their angle of attack has to be consulting, because that's just a massive, juicy pile of cash.